Assalamu alaikum and welcome everyone to the Disinformation Age and Spreading Fake News online panel discussion. We will start very shortly as we wait for the rest of the audience to join us. The numbers are increasing and this should take about a minute before we begin our panel. Welcome everyone to our third panel discussion on Disinformation Age, Spreading Fake News. And in this panel, we are going to define disinformation and what fake news is all about. In addition, we will hear from our panelists and a keynote speaker about the current and the future tools and examples of how this can be tackled for a safer and smarter cities across the world. My name is Marwan Maroof, and today I am joined by Mr. Craig Nell from Oracle, the cloud platform leader and security, mobile, and cognitive experience. He is head of Oracle Middle East, Africa, and Turkey. And Mr. George Prince, Chief Operating Officer of Leiden Corp, and he is based in Austria. Mr. Haris Buljubasic, he is based in Bosnia, and he is currently a digital producer and presenter at Al Jazeera Balkans. Initially, I would like Mr. If you don't mind, the next slide, Mr. Walid. I have shared with everyone a very interesting report that was issued by the Broadband Commission. And it is titled Broadband Commission Balancing Act. It is supposed to help UNESCO member countries in fighting disinformation while defending freedom of expression. We can't have one without the other. Protecting freedom of expression, especially at the private and the consumer and the public, while at the same time finding a method to define what disinformation means and how it can be policy-wise regulated and certain prevention measures taken. It's a very extensive report. It has almost 23-step tools developed to assess disinformation responses, including their impact on freedom of expression. Next slide, Mr. Walid. Everybody talks about misinformation and disinformation interchangeably. If you look at the various dictionaries, there are many definitions, but finally the definition that was adopted by the Broadband Commission and later the UNESCO defines clearly the difference. Misinformation is false information that is shared inadvertently without meaning to cause harm. This is usually done by public or even children or even people who are trying to show off. While disinformation is engineered, it's intended to cause harm, and it is deliberately sharing false information to guide certain policy or to cause certain unrests. The tool helps the countries, governments, and even private institutions to formulate legislative, regulatory, and policy responses to counter disinformation in a manner that supports freedom of expression. The tool includes 23 reference points to enable assessment of responses in accordance with international human rights norms, paying additional attention to access to information and privacy rights. The disinformation response is broken into 4 different categories. One is an identification response, just to identify that actual disinformation and where it fits. And then responses aimed at producers and distributors. And then responses aimed at the production and distribution mechanism. And the final one is responses aimed at the target audiences of disinformation campaigns. So if a country is facing a major disinformation campaign, that country can now have a set of tools which is, greatly acceptable and adaptable across the world. It is an umbrella that I believe will help us from the bad rains that come from above. I would like now to introduce Mr. Craig. Craig, thank you very much. He is in South Africa, and the weather is probably very different from here by now. Craig is a leader in his field, and he is here to share with us his experience and various input points. Mr. Craig, would you like to introduce yourself in a better way than I can?
Thank you very much, Marwan. Appreciate that. Let me just share my screen here quick. Okay, so thank you very much for that introduction. I have been with Oracle for the past 10 years, almost to the day. And prior to that, I was in the I have been in the IT industry for more than 3 decades. As you can tell, I've lost a lot of hair, and I'm a particularly old guy, so I have a lot of experience, is what I can say. I started my career as a software engineer, writing programs, and then I've also held some various managerial positions in IT. During the dot-com boom, I was able to also start up 2 companies, which I no longer am involved with, but they were quite successful at the time. And I think that is really enough about me. So when I saw the title of today's session, the first thought that came to mind was something that John Lennon once said. He said, "I believe in everything until it's disproved." And then he goes on to say, some of the other things, but it's the first sentence that really stuck with me. And I think that today, sadly, we are moving into a world where it's no longer a case of true until proven false. It's now a case of it's false until it's proven true, which is really a sad state of affairs, in my opinion. The inspiration for my message today comes from the Broadband Commission research report that Marwan has explained. I find this to be an extremely well-researched, balanced and comprehensive report with a wealth of information, and I would encourage everyone with any interest in the subject to have a read at that. Today, however, I would like to focus for just a few minutes on the role of technology, and specifically artificial intelligence and blockchain, both as an enabler for the creation and spreading of fake news, as well as a mechanism for detecting and perhaps the prevention thereof. I seem to have just missed. There we go. So the progress made by artificial intelligence techniques for customization, for dissemination and generation of content, and also the increasingly digital world we find ourselves in, has created this unhappy situation where sensationalized fake content and disinformation thrives and spread like wildfire, whereas establishing the authenticity of the truth and differentiating reality from fakes is becoming increasingly daunting. Now, one of the most common uses of AI to create disinformation is called deepfake. Now, this is probably a term that you have all heard before, but how does it work? So it utilizes what is referred to as a generative adversarial network. In this network, we have a generator and we have a discriminator. And at the very basic level, the goal is for the generator to generate an image that satisfies the discriminator. Now, this can be any image. However, for illustration purposes, in this instance, I will use the face of a female. The generator will start with a random image. Now, this, again, could literally be just a few random pixels, as you can see on the slide at the moment. The generator will then create an enhanced version of this image, and it will pass that on to the discriminator. The discriminator has access to a number of goal images, okay, images of women in this case. And so it compares the image from the generator to determine whether it can distinguish between them. Now, initially, the answer would be yes. And so it goes back to the generator to make modifications to those pixels. And again, the discriminator will evaluate. And it does this in a very tight loop, and does this for millions and millions of times and very rapidly, until finally the generated image becomes indistinguishable from the goal images. Now, this can be taken a step further, and we can change identities with the same basic underlying mechanism. Let's say I want to change one person's identity, in the top left here, the American actress Jennifer Lawrence, in this example, to another person's identity, Steve Buscemi, and I chose him because he's got such a vicious face, also American actor. Now, the generator will modify pixels in the face and pass that to the discriminator. The discriminator now has a different goal. It will not check to see if this is a person in general, but rather it would check specifically if this is Steve Buscemi. Now, if the answer is no, it will go back to the generator, and as before, they will work in a very tight loop until the generator makes modifications that the discriminator can no longer detect. Now, if we apply this mechanism to each frame of a video, you get something that looks like this. I'm going to play a very short video clip for you. What I'd like you to do is pay very close attention to the movement of the body, as well as the mouth and even the eyelids.
I expected Amy to win, so I just like, it was just, this was very truly surprising for me. Yeah, I was just really surprised.
Hi, here. Sheridan Watson from BuzzFeed right here.
Hi.
So you're a huge Bravo fan.
Oh,
Who
yes.
is your favorite and least favorite housewife of all cities?
My favorite is probably Lisa Vanderpump.
Okay, so enough of that. But you can see how this technology was used to create a very realistic image of one person's face being used, to create another, to swap the identities. Now, this is how we can create videos of political leaders saying things that they never actually said. The Belgian Society Party, or Socialist Party rather, released a low quality, which was not even a deep fake, but still a phony video of President Trump insulting Belgium, which got enough of a reaction to show that the potential risks of higher quality deepfakes is immense.
I expected Amy to win.
Now, perhaps the scariest of all is that this technology can be used to create doubt about the content of real videos, and by so suggesting that they are, or they could be, deepfakes. Given the risks, it would be extremely valuable to be able to detect deepfakes and to label them clearly. And this would ensure that fake videos do not fool the public and that real videos can be received as authentic. Now, deepfake detection as a field of research was begun a little over 3 years ago. The early work focused on detecting visible problems in the videos, such as deepfakes, where the face don't blink, the eyes don't blink, and small, issues like that. But with time, however, the fakes have gotten better at mimicking real videos, and it has become harder to spot for both people and detection tools. If you just think back to the video that I showed earlier, you could see that there was also, that was very well done. The facial expressions were following quite nicely. The eyes were blinking and all of those things. Now, there are two major categories of deepfake detection research. The first involves looking at the behavior of people in the videos. So let's suppose you have a lot of videos of someone famous, such as President Obama. Artificial intelligence can use this video to learn his patterns, from his hand gestures to pauses in his speech, how he moves his head, all those things that are really unique to the way in which he speaks. The artificial intelligence system can then watch a deep fake of him, and it will notice where it does not match those particular patterns. And this approach has the advantage of possibly working even if the video quality itself is essentially perfect. Other researchers have been focused on differences that all deepfakes have compared to real videos. Now, these are subtle details, and it's much harder for people to see, but AI algorithms can show how deepfakes are not quite perfect yet. Detectors like these can also work for any person, so it's not just for a few world leaders or celebrities. In the picture here, you can see this is a fake video that was produced from an original video of Mark Zuckerberg, giving a talk, and you can see how the AI software is basically tracking facial expressions, it's tracking hand movements, it's tracking how his head is moved, and within that, it has the capability then to detect whether a particular image or video is in fact fake. Now, in the end, it may be that a combination of different deepfake detectors will be required to actually kill this problem. It should also be noted that recent detection systems perform very well when you give them videos that were specifically gathered for the purpose of evaluating these tools. Unfortunately, even the best models do very poorly on general videos that are found on the internet, and improving these tools to be more robust and useful is really a key next step for the technologists. Now, blockchain is not new technology at all. While Bitcoin and cryptocurrency may have been the first widely known users of blockchain technology, today it's far from the only one. In fact, blockchain is revolutionizing almost every industry, which begs the question, can it be used to at least mitigate the risks of fake news, if not completely eliminate them? Already, the Italian news agency ANSA is using blockchain to verify and credential each of their stories to let you know when it was created, when it was timestamped, and that there are no revisions to it. So once the information is recorded on a permanent and immutable way, using in this case Ethereum as the blockchain technology, you can know that the story that they published actually took place at that specific date and that it was done by them. In the picture, you can see it has on its website the capability for you to go ahead and check. The Associated Press news agency also recently announced a collaboration with blockchain, with a blockchain firm, Everpedia. Associated Press has a long track record of covering the US elections since 1848 at both local and national levels, and again, they will be doing so. And then last year, the New York Times launched its blockchain-based news provenance project, also aimed to tackle misinformation using distributed ledger technology, or DLT, to verify the media source and potential edits. And they have announced that they've actually built a blockchain prototype specifically for this project. So in conclusion, there is no doubt that a lot of work is still to be done before any of these technologies can claim victory. However, I remain quite positive about the efforts and the future in this regard. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Craig. This is extremely interesting. This is the first time I see the presentation myself, and I'm very excited about the blockchain part. I would like to move now to Mr. George Prince, the Chief Operating Officer of a company, Leiden Corp in Austria. He has extensive experience in the field of intelligence, counterintelligence, and psychological operations. A very experienced guy, and I would like him to take the field now and present himself and his ideas.
Good afternoon. I'd like to introduce myself too. My personal background, besides a business administration degree, which I never used in real life, I spent quite a long time in military. I performed my compulsory service as an artillery platoon commander, later changed to military police, MP investigation, and was commander of the Austrian MP contingent in Bosnia and Herzegovina during the EUFOR mission. I was also invited to join the intelligence department and served in various countries. The last stage actually of my military career was the Department of Psychological Operations, better known, or quite very similar to strategic communication, or formerly better known as propaganda ministry. And since then, I'm very into the fake news topic. Some words about Leiden. Viennese-based company, we're international operating, and we are focusing on research and training, operational support. We offer OSINT-based research products. For the OSINT, we're using some software, of course, like the media mining client from Labs, and the Foresight strategic cockpit for traditional media. Especially for the social media, we are using the Blacklight software. It was developed in London by the company Human Cognition. And with this software, we are collecting content, extremist actors from jihadist groups since 2016, since they went to Telegram. We are tracking and interpreting the content from these platforms. Additional to Telegram, we're using TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. We identify the extremist networks and clusters. Well, and later on, of course, we're interpreting, analyzing them. Well, actually, that's most what we do in real life. At the very beginning, as I already pointed out, due to my background, I'm very practical working. So maybe some of participants, academics, researcher, as we have in the office too, in the company, and I'm always in heavy discussion with them. You know, as a COO, I also have to sell from the economical point of view. I have to sell our products. So sometimes speed is over accuracy in military, and decision and solution has to be found quite fast. That's please, I apologize if at the beginning, if some of the definitions are not that properly like in academics. When we saw the first slide about the three terms, misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation, so actually I was missing the malinformation. May I just repeat shortly, the misinformation is false information shared, but the intention is not to cause harm. The malinformation, it is an intention to cause harm, but it is a true information. Meaning, as an example, I can give a leakage of emails. And the last one, the topic of today, is the disinformation. It's a false information, knowingly shared, and its intention is to cause harms. Well, if we want facing disinformation, what an analyst has to do is check out if it is a single disinformation or is it already an orchestrated action by a state or a non-state source. And then we can talk about, if it's an orchestrated action, we can talk about a psychological operation, a strategic communication, and maybe it's already part of a propaganda operation. And in worst case, it's the first step of hybrid warfare. In general, the purpose of a planned operation, PSYOPs, is to convey selected information to an audience, a pre-selected audience, to influence the emotions, objective reasoning, and finally the behavior of the people. It can be behavioral, can be individuals, groups, or organizations. How can we analyze these content? In military, very often used is the so-called SCAME report. It's an acronym for source, content, audience, media, and effects. So all these topics are analyzed out of these fake news. And you just mentioned the Broadband Commission and the ITU report. They have a very similar, in their acronym is IAMIT. It's the instigators, the agents, the messages, the intermediaries, and the targets. So all these 5, or in the SCAME reports 5 too, parts of fake news has to be analyzed. Meaning, for example, the instigators, it's the old question, cui bono? It is for the advantage of whom? Why is somebody releasing information like this? Why is it broadcasted? As long as you do not know who is in the background, you will not know if it's really a psychological operation, and maybe it's a part, as I already mentioned, part of hybrid warfare, of a propaganda mission. The motivations could be political, financially, religious, ideological, very different. The second part we should, or an analyst should focus on is who is operationally the creation and spreading, who is doing the job. Is it an influencer? Is it an individual? Is it a group, a company, organization? In military, we use the so-called Admiralty Code. It's a code, the 5 Eyes intelligence services use it, the 5 Eyes group, to evaluate the reliability and credibility of a source and the content. The reliability, it's up to 5 or 6 degrees, and grades, and then they rate them. Yeah. Another question is which technique was used? Is it a bot based on bots or a sock puppet network, meaning fake accounts? Yeah, the messages itself is, of course, the most difficult. What is being spread? Is it narratives? Is it deepfake, as mentioned before? False claims? And these messages, we have to be very careful because they can highly be connected to a denial and deception operation. So, for example, deception, a mix of fake news and truthful information, so that it becomes much harder for the analyst to find out if it's a fake or is it real. Yes, the problem is analysis needs a lot of time. And the first problem. The second problem, we are living in a, as it's called, post-factual time. And facts are, by some politicians, discarded as fake. So it's becoming really difficult if you have a fake news, you present the facts, what is real, and somebody says, no, everything is fake, what you say. So this one is becoming a little bit difficult. So I'd like to go a little bit to the psychological factors. Why? The question is, why are people that receptive to fake news? So first of all, of course, most of the users of social media are biased users. They have a selective perception. They're also overloaded by information. Something that I also find out with my son is the short attention span. So when I ask in the group, how long do you think a human can concentrate on one topic without the first time, until the first time his mind goes to another topic? It's about 10 seconds, and then you're thinking about something else. So very difficult to show facts when after 10 seconds you're already thinking of something else. And then, of course, we have the group thinking, the peer pressure that makes it very difficult. On the other side, we have the filter bubble, because in the internet, you after a while, everybody knows it. If you buy something in Amazon, after a while, you just get those things offered in advertising that you already bought. The same is in YouTube. If you watch videos, after a while, the algorithm is working and just showing you what you like to see. So what happens in social media, the more people watching, for example, QAnon videos, the more they get QAnon content. QAnon, for those who never heard it, QAnon is a group very popular in the United States. Nobody knows actually who was the founder of it. Some say it's directly out of the White House. The idea is that the world is ruled by a hidden group, concealed group of some people living in Hollywood stars. They are drinking the blood of babies for eternal life. And so a little bit crazy, but they have a lot of followers in the United States. Okay. One very important thing about when we're talking about the responding to fake news, and this is something that I'm missing in a lot of academic papers, is the thought model of, we have two Greek philosophers, it was Aristoteles and Platon, and they said that the human mind has three emotional levels. And the guy looking to the side is the sender, and if you take a look on the screen, on the slide, and on the other side we have the receiver. And Aristoteles and Plato found out that a communication is only possible if both people, the sender and the receiver, on the same level, on the same emotional level. So when we have somebody emotional reading fake news, he's in the second level, the receiver, and you try to bring him the facts. You show him ratio, logic. He will not be able to process this one. So emotional condition is not able to be processed. So what's the solution? If you cannot communicate from ratio to emotion, what's this easy solution? You have to bring back the emotional persons back to the ratio level. How to do this?
May I interrupt 1 second?
Sure.
I think in our ratio or ration. I think ration is the thinking process.
Yeah, the thinking.
Ration. I think we call it ration.
Okay. So,
okay, so it's missing, an N.
Okay. The thinking.
Yeah, ration. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as soon as both are on the same level, they can communicate. So what has to be done if you want to fight fake news? You have to go to emotional level 2. And as soon as you're on the emotional level, you have to send emotional messages. And as soon as the receiver is cooled down from his emotional level, he will be able to go back to the ratio. And then you can communicate on a factual basis. And that's actually the way how communication should be done. Of course, this is difficult if you try to communicate on an official level. And that's why I'd like to talk a little bit about PsyOps. Psychological operations can be split into 3 grades. We have the white PsyOp, the gray PsyOps, and the last one is the black PsyOps. The white PsyOps is an official statement. Everything is official. It's, for example, from the government. The information is true and factual. The output is identified as an official source. The problem is now, when somebody is very emotional about the topic, for example, right now in Austria about the lockdown, we have a lockdown again, COVID-19. So of course, the government is publishing a lot of information, facts about the lockdown, how important it is. Nevertheless, the people are emotional, so they will never accept, they don't trust the government. Whatever comes from the government is not accepted. They say it's fake news too, like Donald Trump says, it's fake news too. So the idea is to find a solution to communicate with these people on an emotional level. So this would be the gray PsyOps. The gray PsyOps, the true source is not revealed. So it could be a puppet socket accounts. You tell what the government tells you, what you want to broadcast your information, you spread your information, but you do not tell you who you really are. So actually this is the gray PsyOps, and the last one is the black PsyOps, is actually everything else, is deep fakes, captured websites, everything is mostly illegal in most countries. And the last slide I'd like to show you is the more, short summary, the more emotional a discussion is in media, the more you have to move from white PsyOps to gray PsyOps. So moving, you have to change the way how to communicate with these people. Otherwise, you will not reach them because they don't trust you. So there are actually a lot of other things, but I think I already overdraw my 10 minutes.
If I may have one question.
Yes, sure.
Just to make sure that I understand and the audience also understand. Why PsyOps is, government approved information. Gray is only a repetition trend.
Yeah.
While black is completely independent, and this is what you're trying to avoid. Is this what I got right, or I'm getting this wrong?
Well, you're completely right. The white PsyOps is completely from the government. You tell this is information from the government. This is from the medical department. But no, most people that are emotional, they won't believe it because it's from the government. This is the problem we have.
Even if it's true.
Yeah, even if it's true, it is true. So what you do is you change from the white to the gray. You're looking, for example, for an influencer. The influencer is spreading the information from the government, but not as a government information, but of his own opinion. Say, hey, it's a good idea what the government says because, well, a lockdown is a good idea right now. The people, the emotional say, okay, if this one is following the rules, I should do this too. Exactly. This is all the big gray, an idea of the gray one. And the black, well, we keep this out because in 90% of the countries it's not allowed.
Yes, it is not, and it is the cost of most problems.
Yeah, yeah, right.
It comes from this side. Okay.
Yes, yes. So altogether, it's nothing, and complete operation is never just white or gray. It's as well as, it's a long process. It's nothing to have fixed in some hours. And this is the big problem we have with fake news, the time factor. So a good analysis needs time to find out who is the person in the background, in the gray. This needs time.
Yeah.
And that's why we need the technical factors. We need, but also the human analysis.
Is this what they call OSINT technology?
Yep. So the OSINT, the open source intelligent, is actually intelligent that is you can collect from open sources, so not hidden sources. Yeah. This is open source intelligence.
Okay, clear. Thank you very much. I have 25 questions for you to come through, but I need to move to Harris. Harris, my friend, are you? Yes. Harris is our youngest person, I think, today, and he is the most intelligent, I would say. Harris, thank you very much for joining us from Bosnia, and I would like you to introduce yourself and begin your presentation.
So I'm a digital producer and presenter here in Bosnia at Al Jazeera Balkans. I've started my career at the CNN's exclusive affiliate for the region. I've been also with Deutsche Welle, which is German international broadcaster. And before Al Jazeera Balkans, I had spent 2 years with TRT World. So it's 4 very different cultures, 4 very different narratives. So there's also a lot of experience, unfortunately, with fake news, which I'm going to share with you today. So if we can just quickly jump onto my presentation. So we all have different experiences, obviously, with fake news. We have come across them, but this would be a very, very basic of what fake news actually is. It says that fake news is false stories that appear to be news spread on the internet or using other media, usually created to influence political views or as a joke. What I'm relevant to talk about, we can go back. Yeah, we can still go back. What I'm relevant to talk about is fake news in the media. Who is most vulnerable to the fake news are the news channels or any kind of news portals, news radio stations. Why? Because in a very short time, they want to broadcast all the news that they get. Sometimes they verify them in a legit way, sometimes they don't. So I'll just say that when we started as the CNN's affiliate for the Balkans, the aim was to be first. So Bosnia was just passing the new labor law, and our reporter who was on the ground informed us who were in the newsroom that the parliament, one of the 14 parliaments that we have here, has passed the law. Which we immediately published on our website, and we sent also a push notification. 10, 15, 20 minutes later, we find out that the parliament hasn't even voted on the law. So what happened was that we 100% believed our reporter on the ground who was in the building, but just at that point had wrong information. Although we didn't have any bad intention, we still spread fake news because we didn't double check it. We didn't wait for any official source, which is what actually news channels do. They don't wait for official sources if they have someone on the ground. But then from them on, we had a joke like, let's first publish it and then we'll check it. But that's everything but what you actually should do. If I will just be strictly journalistic, then we can move on to the other slide. And I can just say that fake news is simply lies. It's everything that you read when it comes to fake news is lies. It's not true. It's not something we should believe, but actually it's sometimes very hard to find out if something is fake news or not. What's also important to say is that fake news nowadays is an industry. I don't know how much did you follow, but during the last presidential elections in the United States 4 years ago, there was a whole fake news industry in a small country, which has changed its name recently. It's called Northern Macedonia. It's close to Bosnia and Herzegovina here in the Balkans. And there was an interesting example that in one city, a high school graduate a high school student, not even a graduate, actually has left high school to produce fake news in favor of Donald Trump. If you just Google it, you'll find many reports from a small city called Wales, where actually dozens of people lived off fake news during the last presidential campaign in the United States. What also I can say about fake news is that it's deadly. Some reports in August have shown that at least 800 people during this pandemic by August, I guess that number has changed, died due to fake news. Unfortunately, we are living in a time of a pandemic. So I believe that over the last 10 to 10 months, we've all been exposed to fake news. And just yesterday, I was thinking that I should actually stop presenting pieces on the coronavirus. Why? Because I get so many negative comments. I even sometimes my inbox gets like full of hateful comments. I was like, why do I need this in my life? I've been locked in this home for 8 months. I also need to preserve my mental health. But it actually just shows to which extent people have been exposed to fake news. And as just Georg has explained, how it influences what we think. But the worst is how it influences how we behave. Is it just like whatever we publish here on the coronavirus? And as I said, I'm working for Al Jazeera Balkans, which really fact checks everything 100 times, and I'm very proud of that. People will just react negatively to it. We've all heard stories about how 5G actually has enhanced the spread of the coronavirus, and so on and so on. Also, when it comes to U.S. presidential elections that will be held tomorrow, we've had many fake news around that. But as a journalist, I would like just to go a step further and to ask you. Unfortunately, I still cannot hear your answers, but you can answer that for yourselves, and then later on in Q&A session we can talk about it. Would you also consider misleading news, story selection, news selection, and narrative as fake news? I definitely would. I'm quite radical as a journalist, but it comes from a point of me where at the end of the day, I need to be fine. I need to know that I didn't spread anything that could cause negative consequences in the world we live. In one of the media outlets I previously worked for, I cannot say which one was it. When a colleague left, he said, there's enough evil in this world, so I cannot contribute to spreading it anymore. Unfortunately, many journalists serve different narratives. So these are like 4 different topics that I'll just touch on, just to give you a perspective how it looks like from our side. So just before the coronavirus, me and a few of my colleagues, we are not academicians, we didn't do any research, but we had a feeling that people are getting done with narratives. You know, at one point in time, after having BBC, CNN as major source of information for the audiences, because in the background it's agencies, we discovered new media outlets who brought us new narratives, whether be it Al Jazeera, CGTN, Al Arabia, TRT World, who brought us different perspectives. And what's important to mention is also Russia Today. But then people, I think, are getting tired of having one event and then 4 or 5 different interpretations of it. People were really just about to be ready to pay for the correct piece of information. Unfortunately, the coronavirus, this pandemic, has disrupted that. But once it's over, inshallah, in 4 or 5 years, I think people will be back to it. I'll just give you, like, we can pick a few examples. Let's take, I guess everyone knows what's happening in the Xinjiang region in China, or we think we know what's happening there. So I'll just like now serve the Chinese narrative for example, as journalists who work at CGTN do. And I'll just tell you that in Xinjiang, over the past 10 to 15 years, 4 to 5 terroristic attacks were committed by Muslim Uyghurs in the region, and China now says the Chinese government that is doing its best to prevent radical ideas and to prevent any future terrorist attacks. I didn't say any lie. That's what the Chinese government says. And yes, there have been a few terroristic attacks in the Xinjiang region which were committed by Muslims, by Uyghurs. So that's how the CGTN would report on it. Some other media outlet will just tell you that, you know, China is holding up to 2 million people in the concentration camps, that they are being raped, that they are being tortured, that they are being killed there. So if you just go back to what I said at first, I didn't lie to you at all, but I have selected facts, which brings us to our next thought. Can we just change the slide, please? Thank you so much. It's something I learned from my university professor, and I should do a proper research and really see who said this. But it says objectivity is a threshold for the truth, or is the truth a threshold for the objectivity? This is a philosophical question, so we don't need to dig deep into it. But what I can say here is that basically I can give you the correct facts, but if I don't put them in a correct order, if I don't give you the contrafacts, if I don't give you all the facts that I, as a journalist, know, which is my ethical obligation, I'm not being objective. On the other hand, if I do that, did I actually tell you a lie? So that's if we look at from different perspective, like is the truth just a threshold for the objectivity? So also if we go to our next slide, we can just go like through different solutions. As my colleagues already they offered like solutions from their experiences, from their fields. I can just talk about journalism. There is a huge, let's say, black hole which we still don't know how to control, and that's social media. It's extremely influential. It's also where we as journalists pick up on the fake news. There have been a few solutions. So if you take a look at Facebook, in my region, Facebook has partnered with several NGOs who do fact checking for them. So when it comes to the coronavirus, for example, they were able to fight the fake news, but obviously they cannot cover everything, and they cannot cover every field they work on. What's very problematic is if those NGOs are biased. These in our region are quite good, but they still do have a Western biases. When it comes to the media, we have a few now news channels here in the region, and Al Jazeera Balkans is one of them. And I can say that, like, having worked for the two biggest now, CNN's affiliate and Al Jazeera, we are to a certain extent slower. But what we do for sure is that we fact check. So it's extremely rare. We've been on air now, November 11th. It will be our ninth anniversary on air. I don't think that we have had false information, disinformation, misinformation on air for more than like 2 to 3 times. While the other media outlet, our main competitor, is much faster than us, which really attracts the audience. But they've had many false information on air. So what we do on a daily basis is fact checking. There are different tools for that. That's a very another specific topic, which we could discuss on some other occasion. But what it all at the end comes to one thing, and in journalism, it's integrity. So as I told you, I've been working with 4 different media outlets. One is very US-centric, another one is Eurocentric. Then we had TRT World, who is badly trying to oppose all of these, and I'm with Al Jazeera, which I find, and I'm very happy about it, and I hope it will stay that way, inshallah, the most objective I've been so far. And that's why I picked to work for Al Jazeera. I had more options and I didn't have to work here. It all comes down to our integrity, how honest we are to this job. Journalism, I would say, is in a huge crisis. It's not a well-paid job in general. It can be, but it's an exception. It's not well appreciated anymore. Everyone is doing it. So if you probably have noticed, I'm not called a journalist. I'm called a producer, and that's a trend which has been adopted by the most media networks. But journalism, I really see it as a profession where ethics and moral play huge roles. So at the end, it all comes to our integrity. Will I, as a journalist, serve a false narrative? Will I serve any narrative, or just do the facts and then you decide what you're gonna think about it, and how much, on a practical note, I will actually check everything that I give to you, to the as the audience. If you're a doctor, I really don't want to be fact checking what you give me as a prescription, and that should also be as a journalist. I mean, we all as individuals, that's our responsibility to find the truth, but it's also my responsibility as a journalist to tell you as much as I know at that moment. I'm not claiming that's everything, but as much as I know, I will give you, and then I want you to trust me, but that needs to come with the experience and also with doing good journalism.
Thank you very much. This has been a very interesting presentation. I was always hoping that journalists have an oath, just like doctors do. You don't have one, do you?
I hope so. I'm giving my best, and I know that there are many colleagues who do so. But
Thank you very much. Thank you. If I may now start the process of discussing this as a panel, and I'm going to be asking questions, and those questions are directed at some points at one of you, or even they could come from the audience, and from there we take some of those questions. But my first question really goes to our friend Craig. The issue with blockchain, and I have a very specific comparison. Now, we all know that the biggest risks that we have, one of the biggest risks is health. And this is very obvious now with what we're seeing. I even heard that on one of, even the report that came from the Broadband Commission mentions that there were 100,000 false websites or Facebook pages that had hundreds of millions of followers that was promoting information about the vaccine, the vaccination, and whether this vaccination is state-sponsored, and maybe Bill Gates wants to put a chip in your ear somehow, and it will be something that you will live with forever. You will become a computer. We are seeing a lot of this, and we are still looking into methods of capturing those and defining what is fake and what is not. At the same time, we know that blockchain consumption of power has been mainly going towards the coins, the likes of Bitcoin and the likes of others. While this power consumption is, first of all, polluting. Second of all, we are seeing this as a market which is now being deregulated in many places, and less and less are allowed to do it. But still, how much of the blockchain investments and how much of the power consumption is compared to the likes of Bitcoin? You know, blockchain for good reasons like health and like finding fake news and spotting, or maybe, you know, signing some media assets to protect it from being hampered with, compared to other. I mean, you come from the technology world, and you may have some interesting information for us.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I think the real interesting question here, or the answer to your real interesting question, has a lot to do with where the money is going. And sadly, it seems that money is driving money. So what I mean by that is that investment will go towards technology, in this case blockchain, where it can generate more money. And so what we're seeing is a lot of investment going into cryptocurrencies as far as blockchain is concerned. A lot of investment is going into preserving product, doing product traceability, but all of that is really, the end of that is to generate more money rather than to do good. Of course, we've seen some efforts being applied, especially in the field of healthcare, and specifically, driven by the COVID-19 pandemic. So we are seeing that a lot of money is being pushed in that direction, but still it pales in comparison to what we're seeing, in terms of investment in things that do good rather than generate money. One of the interesting things is I recently read about an American company. I forget the name now, but they're quite a prominent company, and they have specifically invested in building a blockchain solution to combat fake news. This is their business. But if you listen to how this is being presented, again, they have commercialized this model so that, at the end of the day, they will make a lot of money out of this. And one has to question the motives behind that. One has to ask, well, are they in it for the money, or are they in it to do good? So I guess, in conclusion, sadly, not enough money finds its way to the good causes. Most money finds the way to the money causes.
Most technology investments, that's like the biggest question there. So if I may ask George one question, because I was also listening a lot to your philosophical talk. What measures can be taken to reduce or neutralize the effect of opponents' fake news as part of foreign strategic communication?
Okay, so what you could do is, of course, the direct refutation, meaning that you point-to-point rebuttal of the opponent's propaganda, if you want so, as long as the message can be proven wrong. What you could do is an indirect refutation, like an example, so to overshadow the content of the opponent's message. For example, Mr. Trump does it. So whenever with a new information about him, he's flooding with the new information. So if you argue against him, he's immediately coming with something new and new and new. And so this is something that the Democrats have problem with. They are focusing on his news, what he spread in social media, and they're working on this to find a correct answer. But as soon as they want to show it to the public, immediately he has the next one and the next one. So it's getting faster and faster, this process. So you cannot react on the first one. You're always a little bit behind. Of course, you can just react with diversion or silence. Silence meaning you're telling your opponent that the message you send out is just not worth arguing with, not even taking care of. And of course, you could use restrictive measures that some countries use. For example, that you block social media. So this is more the technical part. Technical answer to this, blocking social media or cutting off internet as a total.
Which is a difficult one to do.
Say again, please.
It is not easy to do.
No. Technically, it's there are a lot of ways. Yeah.
Maybe it was possible 7 years ago.
Yeah, right.
But today it is not possible anymore, because social media has now become integrated with the business fabric and the. I mean, it's also a way of life, and blocking it is mission impossible.
Yeah.
Harris, I want to ask you quickly. I mean, I did mention this maybe before to you when we had our initial talks about it. Is you mentioned the NGOs and their roles, and what is the possibility of having the level of fake news, misleading narrative, and so on? How can journalists combat false news? Here to talk about the journalist's integrity. You spoke about this, but in addition to this, you cannot work in isolation. You are part of a community, and the world is changing so quickly. You need to adapt. Otherwise, as you said, the whole trained, ethical, even if the others are as ethical, but they're not well trained enough. And why don't you use technology? I mean, yes, it takes you longer to produce the news and to fact check it. And if you're not there on time, then you become old news. So you have to put more interesting narrative, maybe. But where is the role of technology in helping the journalist in quickly adapting to the actual reality he's looking at within the narrative? Because the narrative is something you cannot run away from. Every organization, every government, and every institution has this narrative, whether it feeds its financial needs or it feeds other needs. So I don't believe there is any news that does not have narrative, from the most professional to the least professional. Where does this come in play?
Well, of course. I mean, how we fight fake news on daily basis is like directly and indirectly. Indirectly, we fight it by reporting facts. But you know, sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes you literally have to say in your report, there's been this fake piece of information and it's not true, and this is why it's not true. Obviously, we don't do that too often. We do that just if that fake news has been spread around too much, and then we need to point out on it. How do we use technology? Well, here I have to say something. Not all the tools are applicable to Bosnian language. Most of the tools that you have so far are used only for English, Arabic, I guess, Spanish, some like languages that are spoken by a large amount of people. When it comes to our languages that we speak here in the region, not all tools are accessible to us. We still use. Yeah, so what's still the best for us is to check on the official sources of information, or to see if there is someone on the ground. Obviously, when it comes to fake news, such as did 5G influence the spread of the coronavirus, I don't think that we would bother too much with those, but obviously we do have experts who can then dismiss those fake news. What's really important for us, what makes it easier if you work for a large network such as Al Jazeera, is that obviously we can always rely one on another. So I don't think there is a part of the world which we don't cover, which makes it easier for us. And then you will often see, as it was now with Macron, that we will become a source of information.
Yes, exactly. Now, I have a question that comes from Mr. Elias to any of you, and this is an open question, so it can be answered by all of you as well. Can you shed light on fake news, deep fake, exclusively deployed for commercial and profit purposes? Meaning, the only reason, I mean, I'll give you an example. You know, I'm one of those who follow some interesting blockchain currencies. And I noticed that the news, I mean, even the websites and everywhere you go, you get a lot of massive amount of information that is telling you everybody's doing great, you know, this is an amazing thing, and people start to come on board, and sooner or later, you know, the stock will be, or even the value of the currency will be hampered so much. So is this maybe an example we can use? And any of you would like to answer this?
Well, that is definitely a problem that we're seeing, and we're seeing this all the time. And the example that you've given there, Marwan, is exactly right. And it's not only linked to cryptocurrencies. It's linked to just about every promotional type or for-profit type organization. Now, this has, and I think one of the other speakers spoke about this. This has become big business, so much so that, you know, companies are actually being established specifically to specialize in this type of activity. So you have people that actually build a business around the whole concept of producing and distributing fake news or deep fake videos and the likes. So it is definitely, we're seeing an increase in this. We're seeing, and even now with the US elections happening pretty soon, there's going to be a lot of drive by companies of lesser morals that are going to try and capitalize on this particular event, generating some fake news around that, generating some fake videos around that, in order to grab as much money as they can. Of course, this is not driven in isolation. You have, I mean, the guys that are actually the technologists that are actually producing the stuff. They have to. They won't just do this out of because they like to do it. They are driven by third parties. So politicians, for instance, they would engage these people, and basically it becomes a new business model where these guys become politicians, or just become consumers of these companies, and this is how the whole thing just starts to grow bigger and bigger.
And it's very hard for those platforms to reject that kind of money coming from PR companies, not even from politicians. So there is always a mediator. I think the public relations arm of every industry needs to reconsider its ethical frameworks, because the impact has been extremely tremendous. I mean, I've heard like you get stuff on Facebook which causes people to be killed, and those people don't even know Facebook or don't even have an account. And I don't mean just Facebook. I mean any of those platforms that allow for wrong information or disinformation or even malinformation, as George calls it. May I see if any of you would like to add to this? Or should I move to the next question? Okay. One question coming from Katie. How can we check this information step by step or any way, and how we should take action on it? Even we report to FB, Facebook, their actions is very slow, and sometimes they do not take it down. What kind of actions do government need to do? Ooh, there's nobody here from the government to answer you, but I guess any of you wants to pick this up? I guess it has to be me.
Well, I think the social networks are doing a little better when you put pressure on them. Nevertheless, as an example, I just found, one of my analysts found the just released statement of Abu Hamza al-Karachi. I don't know if I pronounce it right. He's the spokesman of the ISIS. And yeah, and he released, and his statement was released on, I think, 15 platforms all around. And even 48 hours later, it was still found on 6 or 7 of them. And this person is, well, let's say quite known, well known, same as the organization. So I think from the technical point of view, the pressure on these social media platforms or microblogging platforms has to be increased a little bit, definitely. On the other hand, I think just deleting the message, especially for those who are working in analysts, could be difficult and, from my opinion, wrong, because if you just delete it, the problem is not gone. We have the proverb in Austria, keep your friends close, but you keep your enemies closer. So you have to know exactly what they are writing, how they are writing, why they are writing. So the analysis, even if it's, let's say, too late for this fake news, is highly important to later on react on it.
Yes, yes. Well, I would like to refer to that report. This is Magic Report that I keep referring to. And they have put together actually a very straightforward set of tools. Those tools I don't know how much of it has been automated at this stage, but I think the job of the ITU and the UNESCO and the Broadband Commission is to provide, and that balancing act is supposed to, have a balance between freedom of speech on one end and wrong speech on the other end. And that measure is very, very hard to get right. It's a very complex routine. And I think for this, I would like to share the actual report with the question that came from Katie. It is not easy for you to manage Facebook. Facebook is not manageable. They have their own editorial, and they have their own fact checking, and they have their own set of rules, and those rules keep changing as the world is changing around us. These platforms have billions of users. And I believe the biggest problem, I would say, if I was to give advice to a government, I would say each government should have its own society that makes judgment on content that is being distributed in their country. And that content needs to be monitored by societies. Those societies understand the culture, understand the sensitivities, and can figure out what is right or wrong. Regularly, people are judged actually by you could be posting something in Bosnia, and it's very relevant to the Bosnian society. You're not posting it for any other society, and you're still being removed because in Poland it may be sensitive. That doesn't make sense. And I think the likes of Facebook have globalized access and have globalized the social media platform. But I think they need to localize a lot of issues now. The localization of what is wrong and what is right, what is reasonable and what is not, what is possible and what is not. This is my advice, I would say, to anyone, and not just for Facebook, for everyone, from Twitter to even local platforms. Language is an issue because, as you said, many languages are spoken in very small societies. But even those, I believe, should have their own societies that help them out. There are also lots of NGOs that are available, and in that report you will see a lot of them. One question is there a professional forum or website where a normal person can report a piece of fake news? Is anyone aware of that?
Yeah. So in the office, we have a list of 50 websites where you can, from truth checkers, media checkers, where everybody could look up for so-called fake news. So
these are forums.
Second, please.
Forums. These are forums, yeah. Right?
Forums, but where analysts working on it with checking out if it's a false verification of the news.
There should be, I think there should be a sanctions list created. Okay, what makes people share fake news? What kind of narratives are so persuasive to make people believe in something that is not true? That's a very psychological question.
I mean, I can answer from one part. I think that it's much like easier to believe that 5G network has spread the virus than that you actually do a research. What's coronavirus? How does it transmit to animal, to people? Also to leave a possibility that it's an artificial virus. So like they're much easier to understand usually. And those people who professionally produce fake news, they very well know how to do that. They're usually very simple, very appealing, clickable, and likable.
Yes, and there is also something I would like to add here, if you don't mind. You showed us the slide where you have ration and you had emotion, and I think you said that the emotion has to be touched for someone to click his ration on.
Correct. Yeah.
And I think this is very, very relevant to this question.
Yes.
Can you say something about this, maybe elaborate a bit?
So one of the biggest issues is that people, the human person is a group person, so everybody wants to stay in a group. This is, and additional to this, this is group thinking. So when you have somebody, you like to follow an idea, you want to be in a group. That's why the people following the weirdest ideas just to be in a group. So, and then they become biased users. And as I mentioned in one of the slides, with these algorithms of the, for example, Facebook, let's take Facebook. If you're just looking for content of these people, the algorithm is offering you other people who are thinking the same way. So you're becoming more and more in this bubble and more biased. So if for any reason you get a different opinion, you just ignore it because you're sure that it's wrong. It's a wrong information. So this filter bubble is actually something I think would be good to break up. There are ways to break it up, but I'm a little bit clueless because people are beginning to become lazy in thinking. It's easier to follow than think on your own. And this
Especially if somebody trusted sends it to you, who may not have read it.
Excuse me?
It is usually the source, the sharing source, you know, the influencer type,
Yeah,
the gray, your gray hats. I believe these are the most dangerous. The influencers.
Yeah, they are dangerous, but they can be a big help for you too. If you don't reach them by official news, for example, we have highly educated doctors who are telling it makes sense to wear a mask, but they don't believe it. So, but an influencer who is, I don't know, just making music and TikTok videos tells his followers it's cool to wear a mask. Everybody suddenly wears masks. Yeah. So if you need them, use them. It's, I think with the fake news, you have to follow an holistic approach. Technical, official, but also going into the gray. Psyops.
I think we are running out of time. My producer is screaming at me. But if I wish to give each of you just a 1-minute closing remark before I give mine, starting with Mr. Craig from South Africa.
Thank you very much, Marwan. So yes, I think as a final thought from me, I do believe that technology has a very important role to play. Even though there is still a lot of work to be done, I think technology can certainly assist. But I have to add to that technology alone cannot do it. You have to involve people, and you have to involve people with integrity. You have to involve people, with good in their hearts, people that understand what they are busy with. And if we can, reach a perfect balance between this, then I think we'll be on the right track. Thank you.
Haris?
Okay, you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
So yeah, I just don't trust everything you read. For the beginning, use Google as the first and the simplest tool to check everything. You can at least find a few other opinions, see what field that particular piece of fake news comes from, and then try to check very focused, specialized portals or sources of information. So if it's the coronavirus, you can just then check some Media University or some medical portals, and also know who you trust. Have your sources of information who you trust.
Friends, or
yeah. Well, just can repeat what my other speaker said. Maybe it was mentioned in the report that the education of young people is very important, and the critical thinking. Critical thinking is something in our times is getting less important. People think, but our analysts in the company already forced them to the different ways of analyzing, and critical thinking is one of them. Well, I think we have to take a holistic approach on this topic. And may I finish with a quote from the former President John F. Kennedy: "Do not believe everything you read in the internet."
That's nice. That's nice. No, well,
You don't. I got a lot of people who said, "Oh yes, he was a clever guy."
I was gonna say, what's Kennedy got to do with this? That's actually, you woke me up. Well, I would like to say something. You know, having listened to you and having done a lot of research and having read this wonderful report, which has been jointly prepared by one of our major influencers on information and the truth. I spent my life looking for the truth, and everything I look at, I try to define truth in it. But I think the approach doesn't work anymore. You need to define what is the opposite of truth, and that opposite of truth you need to reach yourself when you look at something. It's almost like a job of risk management. It's almost like a job of shopping. If you want to shop for a juice, you're avoiding poisonous material in it. It is eating and drinking now. The internet is no longer, you know, a momentarily, you know, happiness or used only for education. It has become part of our normal consumption life. And I believe governments should also adapt very simple regulatory regimes that help define what is societally acceptable and what is not. In the past, we used to do filtration of the internet and, you know, block this and block that. I think we haven't yet matured into intelligent tools. We're still working with very old tools. The social media has really taken off and has shot off so fast, and the technology has not yet caught up with it. I believe there needs to be counter technology for this. I would say next generation kind of tools which rely on things like blockchain, rely on machine learning, rely on AI, bots, and at the same time, they should be verified by humans, because humans is the real intelligence. While we can use machines for many things, humans still need to make the call, what is right and what is wrong. I would like to thank you all for attending. I would like to thank my team, Majid, Janjita, Walid, and Ashna. And I wish all the Red Hats a very boring night. Have a good one. And goodbye.